welcome to the podcast. Thrilled to have you on. Hoping this will be one of many to come in the future for sure. So I guess for those who are maybe listening and want to know a bit more about yourself, obviously you and I have known each other for a number of years. Do you want to give a quick intro about your background?
Yeah, so my background is I'm a software developer. I've been a software developer for far too many years now. I keep meeting people that have my career is longer than their life, which is a fun new experience for me. So I've worked in all sorts of places. I've worked from my own startup to banks to academia to marketing and to ad tech to AI, which is I've had the opportunity to work in all sorts of places doing all sorts of fun things.
Awesome. And hopefully we'll get into that a bit more today, and obviously some topics that are obviously quite personal to you, which I'm really looking forward to getting diving into. Before we do dive into that, I'm always keen to understand how technologists find their way into technology. Obviously people have different backgrounds. As a kid they were building computers, others find it later in life, other people stumble upon it by accident. But can you remember that specific moment that maybe sparked your curiosity for technology and essentially set you on the path of where you are today?
Yeah, I think well, there's no one specific moment, but my father was an electronics engineer. And what that meant is that when computers started coming out, he hand built one. He bought a kit and built a computer. It was a tiny little thing with an LCD display, but you could actually program it. And then we went through everything. We went through a ZX81, which is, I expect nobody remembers what they are, but tiny little personal home computers, black and white screens, really weird keyboards. And the fun part was my father would have been considered a hacker and an inventor, because by the time he'd finished with it, it had an external keyboard. It was mounted to a board because if you press the keys too hard, it tended to crash, and all sorts of fun stuff. So I've been fortunate. I've had the joy of being around computers since they really came into the home, which is really lucky for me, because I had huge amounts of problem at school. I was definitely, as I was declared, not fit for higher or further education, which is quite funny if we get onto my further background. But so I stumbled into a BTEC in computing from being, I got 3 Bs, 2 Cs, 3 Ds and an E at GCSE, right? I wasn't doing well at school. And suddenly I found this course, I was suddenly the top student in the room. I was, this is my place, and my entire career has then sort of fallen out of that. Right, I found something I was really good at, and I've been lucky that it's a thing that is fun, pays well, and is in its own way creative. Right? Building software is a creative art, so I've had the most fun. I've built all sorts of stuff.
Great. I mean, that brings us on quite nicely, I guess, to one of the points that's obviously quite personal to you. Obviously, you mentioned you had a bit of a tough start, but you found your way, and here you are today. Neurodiversity in software development, right?
Yeah.
That journey for you, I would imagine it's had its challenges, but ultimately,
yeah,
you're probably in a place now where you're far more educated, you're more aware about yourself, and you know exactly how you need to operate, and also potentially how being neurodiverse can actually be a bit of a superpower, if we're being honest. When it comes to problem solving and looking to solve complex solutions, certainly in a team setting as well. So can you share, if you don't mind, your personal journey, obviously being neurodiverse, and how it's essentially influenced your career within software development?
Yeah, so it's worth taking a step back. When people talk about things like ADHD, if you picture what you think an ADHD person is, right? You think bubbly and bouncy and a bit crazy and off the walls and all those, intense things. But neurodiversity is such a broad spectrum. Even ADHD is really two things in one, right? There's two styles of ADHD. There's hyperactive ADHD and inattentive ADHD. So when I've known that I'm a bit weird, quite frankly, since I was young, right? I didn't fit. I was the squeaky wheel, right? My sense of time is just a joke, right? I couldn't, I would miss things. I would forget things. I struggled with names. At school, my 11 plus was a logic test. I aced it, right? I'm really good at those logic puzzles, which meant I got sent to a school that was set up to send people to Oxford and Cambridge and do classics. So the problem is that's memorization, that's fact recall, that's writing. I discovered later that I was dyslexic. So there's a lot of what they call comorbidities with neurodiversity. It's not one thing, it's a whole spectrum of things. So, and they often come together. People with ADHD often have ADHD or ADD together. So it's not even one thing. The way I think about it is like, if you think about the curve of people, the distribution of people, most people are sort of towards the middle, right? Normalish, right? Then as you get further out on the bell curve, you get the edge cases. And I think, everybody's on that spectrum. Nobody is absolutely average, right? There was a study in the 1950s, the US Air Force basically took measurements of all their pilots and created the best seat, the best average seat. And it fitted nobody, right? Average doesn't fit. The problem is the school systems and everything else is set up for the middle, right? People, especially as you get further towards the edges, the quirks and changes in how the mind works and all those things don't work with the systems. So, I've known I'm strange. My family, especially on the male side, is a bit weird. We don't quite fit. We do our own thing. We get into trouble. All that stuff. I've known that for years, and there was discussion of Asperger's. I know I'm dyslexic. I was diagnosed with dyslexia over 20 years ago, but I've always felt like that squeaky wheel, and I still struggle with this sense of not quite being part of the group. That's a rejection sensitivity is something that a lot of ADHD people will be aware of now, and you get so used to being the outsider and being odd that you assume there's something broken with you. So I didn't discover I had ADHD until 2 years ago. My brother, I'm not going to get into the life details, but I ended up spending several weeks living with my brother. And he is the typical, when you think of ADHD, when I talk about hyperactivity, he's that. And he had been diagnosed and he took the meds and it really helped him. And he pointed out a bunch of the things that I did were ADHD symptoms. I didn't even know were symptoms. Right? So the one of the biggest challenges with all this stuff is you may not even know that's what you are, right? So, and the real test, somebody said, the psychiatrist that I worked with that did the diagnosis said the real test for this stuff is if you take the meds and they work, you've got ADHD. If you take the meds and they don't work, you don't, right? You have something else. And I took the first day I took the meds was mind blowing, right? Suddenly my level of focus went up. I could think straight, right? The noise in my head went right down. It was odd. I struggle to believe that everybody else's world is like that, right? Mine's full of bouncing, noisy stuff, right? Staying focused is hard sometimes, right? It's just staying on task, not getting fed into those, there's dopamine triggers. So things like, Facebook, right, is set up to trigger dopamine. Those random ads and random things that it comes up with are designed to pull you in, to give you those little hits of like, oh, new thing. And with inattentive ADHD, that's dangerous.
Yeah, big time. Yeah.
So when I discovered this and I started with the meds, and I and a bunch of therapy, right? There's a bunch of, people talk about late diagnosed ADHD being diagnosed at 25. I was diagnosed at 48, right? And it made me rethink a whole bunch of the stuff I thought about myself. So my journey, I'm still learning, right? I'm still learning what works for me, what doesn't, where my strengths are, where my weaknesses are, and how the medication and therapy and just life adjustments can help change those. But you said something else interesting, right? Which is neurodiversity. People label it as a superpower, and it is. I think differently to other people, and I've known that for a long time, right? I can think about systems. One of the beauties of software development is I can think about systems and things as a whole in a way that a lot of people really struggle with, and that's perfect. Right, that's really great for my industry and for what I do. So, yeah, it is. The way I think about it now is play to your strengths, mitigate your weaknesses. Once you understand how your mind works, you can lean into the stuff that works for you. What are you good at, right? Do you need to have a 9-to-5 job? If 9-to-5 doesn't work for you, if you're a night owl because of the way your brain works, be a night owl, right? Find a job that adapts to that and allows you to work when it's best for you. The most fascinating thing for me, though, is as you become more aware of this stuff, you see it everywhere. I think the software industry especially is filled with people with neurodiversity.
Yeah.
Right. It's just, they're everywhere. And all sorts of different kinds. It's not just this one, label. That label is so broad. You see those people that are details focused, they're absolutely, right on the money. The generalists, right? I'm really great in a crisis. The problem is I know that I can't, I can stay up all night and work on a crisis and stay focused and do all that. The boring, mundane day-to-day kills me.
Yeah.
Destroys me. I get bored out my skull. I can't focus. And the moment I'm bored, I can't focus.
Yeah, you just completely switch off. Yeah.
So I switch off, right? And I've realized that I've ended jobs in two different ways. Either the stress has made me rage quit. I've suddenly reached a breaking point and I've stormed out in the middle of a meeting, swearing and literally rage quitting on the spot with the senior manager. Or I've just got so bored that I started hunting around, right? And that's a lot of my career is accidental, right? But it is strengths, right? These things. I have a lot of stuff in my head, right? I'm a generalist, but what it does is somebody goes, "Oh, I've got this problem." And you're like, "Oh, have you thought about this or that other thing?" And I join people together, and that really works. It's sometimes a bit hard for career development because you don't fit in the boxes, but it's from the stuff I do, I have a great fun.
Yeah, but I also think just from you work in a role where most software engineers every day are problem solving, right? They're looking at solutions and it's always the next thing. So we always talk to kind of hiring managers and CTOs, CIOs, and these folks don't want teams that are just kind of vanilla and everyone approaches the same thing from the same angle. So that's kind of me going back to that point of saying actually being neurodiverse, certainly within this professionalism, software engineering, is actually a massive advantage ultimately.
It is as long as the management structure, the people involved in the team are aware of that, right?
Yeah.
Find all those different forces that work together. Find what works for them. Find collaboration that works, right? And manage them in an effective way. Cookie cutter management doesn't work in those kind of really diverse mixed teams, but they are incredible.
And I guess there may be quite a few people listening or even watching this who are maybe on a similar path to yourself, where they've struggled with certain aspects of the role day to day due to being neurodiverse. I guess for anyone going through that period right now who are maybe struggling and potentially looking for answers, are there any kind of nuggets or snippets or certainly experiences that you've kind of been through that you could share that might benefit somebody on that journey?
Yes, this is a hard question, right? And this I'm becoming emotional just thinking about this stuff, right? I've struggled most of my career feeling like I'm about to be fired, right? That I'm failing in some way, right? That because I've forgotten about the meeting or the thing, or whenever end of year reviews just have filled me with dread.
Yeah.
Because and it was a horrible realization that I've literally spent my entire career waiting for the hammer to fall. And it very rarely has. It's very rare that I've actually been, most of my leaving of jobs has been under my own volition of some form or another, which says something, right? It's not that I'm failing, but that's what it feels, that's what it's always felt like for me. And it's taken a long time to come to terms with that, and I still am. So what can I advise? Learn more. If you think you might be neurodiverse, even if you're not neurodiverse, find out what works for you. Everybody has strengths and weaknesses, right? What works for you? Where are you the 10xer, right? If you think about your team, right, some people are good over here and some people are good over here, right?
Yeah.
And some people are connectors. Some people are the people that join the dots between other people, or, manage the flow to make sure everybody's on track. It's not all about, software writing isn't about writing code. It sounds weird to say, but it's about solving problems. We build software to solve problems for the business we're working in, right? Which means that actually, one of the most useful things sometimes is asking the right question. Are you writing the right thing? If you spend 6 weeks writing the wrong thing, it's pointless. It's worth nothing. Where 10 minutes going, oh, this is the right thing. Half the time you write the software, they come back and somebody says, oh, it's not quite what I needed. It's what I asked for, but it's not what I needed.
Yeah.
So think about it from the bigger picture. Learn more, right? Explore more. Find out about yourself. Go and get support. Go and find out. You will, if you're neurodiverse. I can't speak for every neurodiverse person, right? As I said, everybody is such a broad spectrum. Everybody is different. Everybody's different generally, but you have to find the sweet spot where I am so lucky now. I get to work with a team of machine learning people as well. And I get to sit with a foot in multiple camps and join the dots. And sometimes I've asked the engineering question or the thought-provoking question, which has changed the direction of some of the research, right? So find your niche, right? It's not, if you don't fit the job, maybe you're in the wrong job, right? It's not a failure of you. You're in the wrong place. You thought you're in the right place because, that's the one that pays the money, or that's the one that looks good on the CV, right? A lot of people that I've known have worked at the big three, right? And they hate it because it can be a meat grinder, right? So it's not about, it's about finding something you want to do every day, right? You are going to spend so much of your career doing this job, right? This is 40 hours a week for 30 years, right? 30 to 40 years. Think about that for a minute, right? What do you want that job to be? And it's not all going to be roses, right? Sometimes you do need to put the work in, and you're going to need to learn, and you're going to need to adapt, and you're going to need to take chances. But try and, where you should be aiming for is a job that makes you go, oh, great, I'm going to go into work today and I'm going to do interesting things, whatever that is for you.
Yeah. 100%. Good. I mean, that was brilliant. I mean, hopefully it's hit home with a few people that are listening. Really appreciate you kind of opening up on that topic as well, because it's obviously been a journey, and it's a journey for you today, right? You continue to move through that. So,
yeah, no, and I will say that, right? It is a continuous journey, right? I am still learning. I'm still learning about the people around me. I'm still learning about myself and what really works for me and how to maintain over time. But it's better to be. I'll tell you something that makes me a bit sad, right? Which is before my father. Well, my father passed away a couple of years ago, and this is really before I started this journey. And you look back now, and you look back through his career and his life. And you realize that he was the same. He's like me, which means that he never knew, not really. Which means if he was as punishing on himself as I have been, it makes me deeply sad.
And again, that's because that was back then, and obviously he didn't have access to what you have access to now.
No.
And the clarity and the just being able to be open and honest and look for support, which you're right is a shame.
We look at schools. I know even now, right? Schools, being at school can be a joy for some and a horror for others, right? Because the neurodiverse set are either, the fun nutters, right, or the troublemakers, or the edge cases, right? It's how do we support everybody on that learning journey? That really bothers me, right?
Yeah,
because the system is still broken in many ways. It's better. We're aware that this stuff exists, and we're not just not fit, not educatable, right? Some of the neurodiverse people I've met are some of the brightest people I've ever had the pleasure to work with.
Yeah, I can attest to that as well.
But I bet they didn't have fun at school. Maybe some of them did, right? If you're details focused, if you're into, memorizing things. I know some people that are just great at the fact stuff, which means like history and classics. They're great for those. Yeah. I'm not. I really struggle, right? But yeah, how can we make it better for everybody? That's my deeper question.
Yeah, and it's a valid one for sure. Okay, so I guess aside to your day to day, obviously, as you mentioned, you've got a career that spans over 25 years. I know something else that's quite important to you and something you're quite passionate about is obviously contributing back to the developer community. I know you've got a kind of strong background within Scala development. You've done a lot of talks and you're quite well immersed within that world. What kind of, I guess, motivated you to want to start doing that and kind of reaching out to people within your own world and I guess maybe contributing to open source projects in the past and these sorts of things?
Open source blows my mind, right? Because when my career started, open source didn't exist, right? The internet didn't exist in the way it does now, right? You didn't have access to Google to search the internet and find other things. When you learned a programming language, you went and bought a book, right? You bought the floppy disk with the language, with the compiler and the thing and the tools on, and you bought a book. And basically you were starting from scratch every time, right? And you built cool things still, right? There was still fun days. But as the internet's evolved, suddenly, people are like, oh, I built this cool thing and want to share it with you, right? I want to share. We love sharing stuff with other people. Everybody does, right? Whether you're a software developer, an artist, whatever it is, people like building things and making things. And people like other people using those things, right? Don't just take software. Take 3D printing. There's a whole community there about people sharing 3D printing designs and things, because it's cool for me to build stuff, but it's cool to help other people build stuff too. How did I get into it? I was lucky. One of my work colleagues and friends at the time had started contributing to something, and we started talking about it, and he got me involved in a project, and then he was like, oh, we should talk about this at one of the conferences. So we did, and it was a terrible talk. It was just, looking back now, it was the classic early talks, right? I was all over the place, mumbling away. And one of the things that I did at that point is I realized that I did care about this. I did want to share, and then I worked to get better at it. So I found Toastmasters, which is a great way to learn those public speaking skills, and I've kept doing it. And I've met so many friends and colleagues and community out there just going to conferences and meeting people, because who doesn't love talking about stuff you care about, right? Find the communities to go and talk about the stuff you care about, whatever it is, right? If you care about something, from ecology to software, right? Whatever it is, there'll be a community of people out there. And with the internet now, that community can be world spanning, right? And you can go and talk to people and experiment and play with ideas the world over. And open source is just my space for doing that with software, which is something I care about.
And are there any particular kind of meetups or conferences or, I guess, communities that you'd like to talk about on here today, or maybe promote for anyone who maybe has operated in the Scala world, or they're looking to come through and they want to talk to kind of like-minded people?
Yeah, so I'm gonna add one point here, which is, yes, I'm a Scala developer, and this almost goes back to the neurodiversity point, right? The people tend to be religious about which programming language they do, and it's kind of a bit odd, really. But there's a fundamental truth, right? The reason why do I like writing software in Scala? I like writing software in Scala because I'm really good at it, right? And it supports my needs. When I'm writing Python, I find I make a lot of typos, right? I make a lot of spelling errors. I'm dyslexic. I can't spell for toffee. I'll try and guess the word, and then I'll think it's wrong, and then I'll correct it, and it'll be even wronger, right? It won't. So the tools you use should support the way your brain works, right? And whatever use case you're doing, right? If you're doing quick experimentation in machine learning, Python is probably the language of choice, right? If you want reliable language that runs in servers 24/7, you want to know that when it's compiled, it's as good as it's going to get, right? And you use the language to protect you from yourself. So I like Scala because it fits my mental model. Compilation prevents me running stupid code, right? So, but for any other language, whether you're a front-end developer, whether you're doing Vue, JavaScript, TypeScript, there will be communities in every major city around the world now. There'll be conferences in there'll be conferences around the world in whatever it is that you are most interested in. And don't be embarrassed by what it is. I'm a developer's developer, right? I care about things like tools, right? The reason I got into open source was like, oh, we can make the tools better, right? It's not just about building the next whizzy front end or whatever. It's about how can I make, and I'm really interested in using, I've had the chance to play with large language models in terms of code generation. And that's a whole nother discussion about can use LLMs to help developers build better and faster code.
Yeah.
As I say, it's a side discussion. But my point is, if you're passionate about it, there will be communities. Personally, obviously, I'm based in London, so there's the London Scala User Group, which is an awesome group of people. There's data science groups. There's pick whatever you like. There will be a group nearby. And now, for any project you like, there'll be Discords, there'll be chats, conferences. I will be submitting talks to a few of the Scala conferences that are coming back to life this year. So Scala Days will be one of them, and I think there's some others happening. I'm not sure which ones yet. So there's lots of. You've got to take a chance and go out there. Just go, and you don't need to be. You don't need to be talking if you don't want to. If it makes you uncomfortable, just go. Find your community and talk to people, because you'll love it.
Yeah, definitely. It's good advice. Certainly for more kind of junior folks or maybe grads that are looking, they're probably at that crossroads now where they're looking at jobs, their career, they're looking at various different languages, what road they want to go down. And I think you're right. I've had this a lot over the years. Obviously, I've been doing this a long time and spoken to many software engineers, and some are more obsessed with their particular kind of coding language, if you like, more than others. Others are very kind of, I guess, focused on using the right tool for that problem at hand, which is, I guess, what you're referring to.
Yeah. If I want to write reliable system software for the inside of Linux or something, Rust is probably the right answer, right? It gives you protections that Python won't, right? It gives you, each of these languages are trade-offs in their own space. Some are fast developed, some are more reliable, some, the very type-safe languages are designed to not allow a bunch of errors that can occur in other languages. So you can build very reliable systems in them, but that may not be your focus, right? I want to build a quick game that runs on the web, right? Well, JavaScript, right, or TypeScript, right? Use whatever works for whatever domain you're in, but go deep. Whatever it is you're currently into. I use languages. Most of the languages I use still exist technically, but aren't being used on a daily basis. Right? Most people, I could mention languages that people aren't using. Ball and Delphi still exists. That was my first commercial language, but there's not many people coding in it now. Languages evolve, so languages will change over your careers. Don't be afraid of that. Just dive in. But whatever it is you're doing, I always say to people, it's like, what should I do? It's like, have that sort of T-shaped experience, right? Or sort of M-shaped experience where you have a broad knowledge. So have a bit of knowledge of everything, but have depth in a few places, right? But don't be afraid to go and learn, right? You'll spend half your life learning new things. Just go and embrace it and go and learn new things.
Yeah. I mean, probably brings us quite nicely onto LLMs, learning new things. Obviously, AI is the talk of the town. It's everywhere you turn, seemingly. There's an AI conference, there's an AI podcast, there's someone across the desk talking about AI, or we're using it day to day, right? Everyone's using it. I'm using AI day to day. So LLMs within software development, certainly within, I guess, just generally software development, but financial services and other kind of domains that you've worked in specifically. I mean, how are LLMs kind of impacting, I guess, software development in general?
I don't think they've had the full impact they're going to have yet. Now, you've got to be, one of the things that LLMs are not the answer to everything. They solve a bunch of problems that were hard to solve before, but they come with a bunch of caveats, right? For example, there's one of my jobs here where I'm working right now, when we're looking at LLMs, is going, which problems are they applicable to? Which problems do they help us solve? And what are the downsides? So here's some simple downsides, right? Compared to a neural network, right? LLMs are dog slow. They're really expensive and slow. Right? Compared to a traditional program, they're inconsistent. You run the same query, you run the same prompt through an LLM, and you get different answers each time you run it. Even when you start fiddling with the controls you have, getting a consistent answer out of an LLM is difficult. But it can do tasks that are really hard to do in traditional software. Take this block of text, summarize it. Right? or tell me whether the speaker is positive or negative against an idea in this text, right? So there's a whole bunch of use cases where you can use it in a way that, yes, there are traditional like NLP, natural language processing techniques to do some of this stuff, but it suddenly becomes really accessible, right? The modern LLMs, I can give it a simple text prompt, and 90% of the time it will get it about right. And for a lot of cases, getting about right is enough.
Yeah.
But it's not fast, and it's not consistent, right? And it can make things up. One of the biggest challenges in LLMs is the fact hallucinations, right? If you're using it as your information source, right? Let me give you an example as a person writing a chatbot using an LLM, say, right? Am I happy to put that chatbot? So that chatbot is using a document store as its basis of information. It's using, let's say, some reference material, and it's giving answers to users. Right? And this is a classic, what we call RAG. This is a retrieval augmented generation. This is where you use an LLM to synthesize answers out of a document store. Imagine doing a Google search, taking the top 10 answers, giving them to a person and saying, given these documents, answer this question. Right? That's what RAG search do, and it's really great, right? We can now do this. If you've ever seen like the Google summaries, right? Look at the Google summaries when you do a search now. Sometimes they're really great and it gives me the answer right then and there. But sometimes you read the summary and you're like, that's not right. It's just wrong, right? It's misinterpreted what the text is. So there are dangers there. Would you be happy to put that in front of someone when it was important? Let's say medical diagnosis, right?
Yeah.
Dear Google, my symptoms are, I think you've got plague, right? It might be right, but there's a risk there, right? There's no free lunch there. And there's been a bunch of cases where LLMs that get things wrong and have impact, right? And I think there's going to be more cases because one of the oddities about LLMs to me, LLMs are really good at sounding like they know what they're talking about. It's very hard to get an LLM to say, I don't know. In general, it will make something up, and they are really, really good at sounding like an expert. Right? You never get the ums and ers or the unconfidence. It's always like, oh, the sky's green.
Yeah.
Right. So
and then is this what you were after type thing at the end?
Yeah. And then you say, no, you're wrong. It doesn't. Oh yes, so you're right. Like, let me.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that weird conversation. If you think about, if you've ever had follow-up conversations where it's clearly got something wrong, those were really weird conversations because it just accepts that you've corrected it and gone, oh yes, clearly this, no, the sky is blue. And it's like, oh, the sky, if I go, the sky's yellow, I'll ask an LM why the sky is orange, and then keep prompting it and keep forcing it to keep telling it the sky is orange, and it'll keep coming up with more and more ridiculous answers to try and agree with you.
Yeah.
So you've got to be careful. Code generation though is a really fun topic, but it actually suffers from the same problems we've just talked about. Right? Getting it to, if I say to an LLM, go to ChatGPT or your favorite LLM of choice and ask it to write you a method, it will actually do a pretty good job most of the time in any language you care to choose. But getting it to work on a larger piece of software has a whole bunch of other issues. It's a bit like this synthesis thing. If you did a Google search on your code and said, now given these chunks of code, fix the code, you don't have the holistic picture. So it tends to get things wrong. It tends to get confused or use a library that's out of date because when it was trained, this was the version of the library and this is how to use it. And then that's changed over time, but it doesn't know. But the tools are evolving. Even as we speak, a couple of weeks ago, Claude 3.7 came out. and it's even better at writing code. And there's a whole bunch of tools, developer tools. So you've got things like Copilot is a basic one.
Yeah.
You've got Cursor. You've then got other tools like Ada or Claude Code, which are trying to look at these what they call SW agents, which are trying to build the tooling around the LLM to give it the code context, to allow it to say, here's a code base, here's a GitHub issue, go and fix the code. And it blows, as a software developer for far too many years, it blows my mind that it can even get close to that. If you'd said to me 5 years ago, right, I could go to a piece of software and say, here's a GitHub issue, here's the code, go and fix the issue. Even if it only got it right one time in 5, that would be mind-blowing.
Yeah.
Right. It's a game changer.
I guess it's all automating your world for you, right? It's
right.
Making processes far more streamlined and just getting stuff done in kind of less than half the time.
Yeah. So this is I've been experimenting with this stuff quite aggressively, and it is a fundamental game changer. I was rewriting a project that I'd written at home some time ago, and it needed updating. It's quite large and it's a bit clunky, and it was before I knew how to do modern web development, so it's really old style. It's like I wanted to bring it up to date, but you're like, it's months of work, right? It's like it's probably a 3 or 4 month project of weekends to update it, and it's just like, as an ADHDer, that doesn't fill me with joy, right? It just doesn't. It doesn't fill anybody with joy. It's just boring, right? Because most of it is grunt work. So I was experimenting with Ada and then Claude Code, and it blew my mind because I could say, take this lump of code, take this old web page, turn it into a new one, right? And it did. And it wrote better code than I did in Vue in this case, right? And it wasn't perfect, right? It would get confused and it would sometimes get stuck. But I did more coding in a weekend than I would have done in a solid month, because I could imagine you had like a really amazing, fresh, straight out of college developer who's really, really excited and really eager and really capable, but they have gaps in their knowledge, right? So you'd send them off, they would do some work, they'd come back. Sometimes you'd be like, yes, that's it. And sometimes you come back and go, oh, not quite. Or they got stuck and like, I don't know how to fix this. Right, and you'd come in and you'd fix it, and then you would send them off again, right? It's like that, except that cycle is 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It is, I think the industry as a whole is going to change. We don't know how to do it right yet. One of the problems with these tools, for example, is they write too much code. If I've got a big production system and I want a fix, sometimes I want the fix to be as small as possible. Right, minimize the impact surface, and LLMs just go, oh yeah, I'll go and fix these things here, or I asked it an opinion on how I should refactor some code, and then asked a different question, and it promptly went and refactored all the code to try and match the question.
Yeah.
So you need to treat it like an overly eager puppy at the moment, but it's a really smart puppy, right?
Yeah.
And that will evolve over time. I think the next 5 years in software, probably even the next 2 years in software, are going to be game changing. It's like having an entire development. It's like me having an entire development team working for me, right? I'm a one-man army now.
Yeah.
And it doesn't solve all the problems. It doesn't. I have to be the oversight, right? I'm the person working at what we're building and why we're building it, how it should be structured. But I can offload a bunch of the work. And that's just, I've never seen anything like it in my entire software career.
So you mentioned evolving there. So I constantly see online, certainly on LinkedIn, there's naturally with most things differences of opinion and kind of where AI is going to go and how far it can go, and is it going to steal our jobs? Will developers be extinct in 5 years and that sort of thing? I mean, What's your opinion on that? Do you feel like the day-to-day job maybe for a typical software engineer may change? Are you concerned about anything?
Yes, it will change, right? Even if LLMs didn't stop getting any better, right? One of the challenges of LLMs is the models have got bigger and more expensive to run, but they've got smarter. As the models have grown, right? GPT 2.0 was a game changer when it was first came out, but it wasn't actually very useful on a day-to-day basis because it made a lot of assumptions. You couldn't just ask it questions. The way you had to interact with it was quite specific. It was more like, imagine you had to ask, instead of saying, what color is the sky? You would say, the sky is, and it would fill in the next word.
Right.
Right? It wasn't good at doing those generalist things. It was good at LLMs are word guessers. They guess the next word in the sentence. The thing is, the sentence now can be, here's my code. What's the, here's a method. What are the next words in this method, right? Start the method and it fills in the blank, right? Which is bonkers. It's just bonkers. Yes, I think these tools are going to become more powerful. I think they're going to become more prevalent. And I think we're going to become better at using them. But I also think there's going to be a lot of rubbish code being written, right? It's very easy to, if you just relied on an LLM to write code at the moment, it doesn't take into account the bigger stuff, the security, the runtime implications, all the things that you care about when building real applications. That maybe that will change, but it's like, even if they don't get any better than they are now, as we learn to use them, I think it will give each developer more power. But I found so far that I need to give it oversight, right? I use my experience to help it when it gets stuck, to help to guide it in the directions I want to build the kind of things that I want to build. Will it get to that point where I'm just saying, build a game? Right? I don't know. That's a really good question. Even if it doesn't, I think it will change the day-to-day software writing. But there is still a role here for, what are we trying to build? What are the constraints? How are we going to build it? You can't, if you've ever worked with someone, if in a software team where someone has come along and said, we want this piece of software, half of the job sometimes is working out what they actually want and need, not what they ask for, because most people don't think as logically as software developers. Oh, I want to do this job. It's like, yes, but the thing you're trying to solve isn't what you actually want. What you've asked for isn't what you actually need.
Yeah. So
those communication skills, those planning, those bigger thinking, which is what software developers are fundamentally good at, the problem solving, is still going to exist. But like anything, use the tools that are available, right? We don't write code in simple text editors anymore. We use IDEs because they make us faster and more powerful. They take away some of the mental burden. So embrace them, find out where the weaknesses are, but be aware that there are weaknesses. And then I actually think people should be excited, not scared. Yes, the industry is going to change. No, it's going to be interesting times, right? Because we don't know how to use it to the best. We don't know where the sharp edges are yet. So be cynical a bit, right? You've got to check that things actually writing good code and the code you want, rather than just spitting out loads and loads of code. Whatever it is, but I use them. I use just chat to help me design things now. It's like, oh, I'm thinking about building this protocol between these two things. How should I, give me 3 suggestions on how I can build it. How can I deal with this consistency problem? And it's an aid to my thinking. And then I can use that in helping me then build software. So yeah, it is. Things are going to change. Exactly how, I don't know yet, but it's going to be a fun time to find out.
Yeah. To be continued.
To be continued. Yeah. And I think it's going to evolve really rapidly, I think, as well. I think those that embrace these technologies and think about how to get the most out of them are going to accelerate above those that don't. And I think it'll become quite distinct. And then a bunch of people play a catch-up game as we learn to do it.
Brilliant. Well, look, it's been great. It's been really good. I've really enjoyed just sitting down with you today and kind of delving into obviously topics that are close to you. The neurodiverse element was super interesting, and I just hope people are listening that can relate to that and take something away from this today, even if it's one thing. That would be brilliant in itself. Obviously, we've mentioned you're very active in the community. Again, going to be doing some
look me up.
Yeah, we'll hook you up. We'll put some links in and get that advertised so people can come and see your talks, because I'm sure you're great at them. So yeah, I'm looking.
Well, I wouldn't go that far, but I talk about all sorts of random shit. You know, I'm always up for discussion about any of this stuff.
Yeah.
I'm going to add one comment there, right? The key thing, if people are going to take one thing away from this talk, actually, I'm going to give two takeaways from this discussion, right? For me, one is neurodiversity. You are not alone, right?
Yeah.
This stuff is hard shit. Don't. You are not alone. It's learn, share, communicate, talk, right? And I haven't finished my journey yet. I'm still learning, I'm still growing, but I am in such a different place than I was 2 years ago. It is mind-blowing. So just keep pushing forward. And that goes the same for AI and tools and languages and software development, right? Find things that you care about and do them, right? Learn and grow and have fun doing it. And if the place you're in really sucks and destroys you, stop doing it, right? Find places that I would prefer to earn less and have a job I love every day than grind away for the big number salary. I just don't care anymore, right? It's not about the money. It is about finding things to do that I care about. So please keep that in mind. It's not about the numbers. Numbers help, but it's not about the numbers.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's great advice. And like you say, if anyone can take one thing, it's that. So yeah, look, Rory, appreciate it. Obviously supporting the podcast. Hopefully we can do some more in the future. But yeah.
Love to. I'd love anytime. This is I'm really looking forward to the other speakers you've got lined up on the podcast. Well, I think it's going to be a really interesting one to watch.
Brilliant. Appreciate it, Rory. All the best, and yeah, hopefully see you soon.
Take care.